Hey guys, welcome back to the Another Excuse podcast, where we chat to founders, creators, and self-starters about how they started and where they are now. This conversation was particularly interesting for me because I know nothing about restaurants. Everything I know is learned from watching TV shows and movies, and so I learned a lot and I found it extremely interesting. Today's guest is Harvi Singh, the operations manager at Notto Pasta Bar here in London. We have a wide-ranging conversation and go into depth in many interesting topics, but we speak about things like outgrowing friendships and what it takes to survive in the restaurant business, and some crazy stories that are just commonplace in the restaurant business, which really blew my mind. I hope you find it interesting and you learn something from this conversation. Enjoy the show. Hey Harvi, so thanks so much for joining me. So to get started, can you give me some background on who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Harvey. I currently work as operations manager for a new pasta restaurant that was launched back in November, called Notto Pasta Bar, and that is run by a Michelin-star chef called Phil Howard and his business partner Julian Dyer. How I got to that point was I sort of fell in love with food when I was about 14, 15 years old. I was in the local library in Birmingham, and I should have been studying for my exams, but I got a bit bored. So went downstairs, and all of a sudden I went into the cookery section for whatever reason, and from there started reading a book called White Heat by a chef called Marc-Pierre White. And it was just different. It was different to any other book that I've read. The imagery of Bob Carlos Clark just really captured my imagination, and I think you sort of fall into this world of cookery and restaurants and Michelin star chefs. Coming from an Indian background, I was always surrounded by great food. My mom's a great cook, my nan was a great cook, and but I've never seen sort of this Michelin-starred French world, and it really captured my imagination. So over time, I started cooking a little bit and started getting good at that, and just immersed myself in this slightly high octane, dysfunctional world, and it became a passion. It became an incredibly important part of my life, and still is and will always be. And I was determined to try and build a career within it. So I went to university, I graduated, and then I was determined to get into the industry. So I started out as an accountant, working in a country house hotel. That particular country house hotel happened to be run by a great hero of mine called Raymond Blanc, who's a two-star chef, self-taught, and an incredibly inspirational figure. Listen, was I a good accountant? No, I wasn't. I was shit, actually. So, am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Yeah, sure.
I was a shit accountant, and not a lot of things made sense. I think I had the intellect to do it, but it was a massive confidence thing. Particularly at the Myanmar, you're very aware that you're surrounded by some of the best in the profession, and that's worldwide, not just in this country. But also, you're surrounded by those that will, without question, go on to achieving what they want to achieve. And I suppose, I found that, whilst in some respect inspiring, in many other respects quite intimidating. And I suppose that's where I met my first mentors. I was the only one. The accounts department back then was sort of a no-go area. It wasn't a friendly environment for other people to come into. But I was the one that used to get into work for 8:30 and go around every single department, whether you were the kitchen, the gardens, the porters, reservations, whatever it may have been. Shake everybody's hand, just to let them know that if you need anything, I'm present, I'm here, and that sort of broke down communication barriers, which was great. But Manoir was where I really first had mentors, not only from Harvi himself, but the exec chef at the time, Gary Jones, and then the ops manager there, guy called Paul Shanahan. He could see that I wasn't entirely happy, but there was always a hesitation to just jump straight into a restaurant for whatever reason. It came down to confidence again in my own ability and a whole host of other things. And he said to me, "Listen, Harvey, if you want to run and own a restaurant one day, you have to be in one." And saying it now sounds just logical, right? But at the time, it was like, "Fuck me, that's a massive jump." So I decided to do something about it after a lot of procrastination, and I applied to some heavy hitters and some big restaurants across the country. And the first chef to get back to me was Phil, who at the time had just recently opened what is now his new flagship Michelin-star restaurant in Chelsea, called Ellison Street. I was the first front of house person that he interviewed, and what should have been a formal interview turned into an hour chat about food, which was lovely. And he offered me a job, and I remember the GM at the time, who also became a great friend and mentor. She did say to Phil, "What the fuck are you doing employing an accountant into my front of house team?" So I started as a commie, so I was washing plates and carrying trays, then evolved within a year and a bit to a restaurant manager, and that was absolutely without question because of the support, the guidance, the mentorship, and the belief that Phil and the GM Sarah had in me. Absolutely, I worked my ass off, and the job became my life. But you never get anywhere, in my opinion, without the help and the guidance of other people. It's an impossible task to try and do it on your own. Anybody that says that they've done it on their own is being disingenuous. So that was it. And Ellison Street was 3 years, and it was hard work, and it was emotional at times, and full of passion and a great family environment. And at the time, I truly believe it was serving some of the best food in London, still is. It is the place to go without question on a Sunday. And that's where I really discovered an even bigger passion for food. I was able to develop a skill set on the floor that allowed me to build my confidence. And then from there, I've done the rounds. I've spent some time in Soho in a 12-seat restaurant, working with 3 incredible brothers called the Selby Boys, Luke, Nat, and Theo, and they are without question future 3 Michelin-star chefs. And then time in some 5-star hotels and what have you. Every single experience teaching me something. Some of those lessons at times being tough and difficult, but that's what you want. And then ultimately, I got my first ops position when I was 28, and that was hard because you don't know where you sit in terms of the structure and the hierarchy of in this particular restaurant. You know, been going for 15 years, so it was difficult. But again, as difficult as that restaurant was, I got a great mentor out of it. You know, a guy called Ken Sanger, who's a venture capitalist, and he really taught me and ignited the passion for business again. And then I just, you know, I saw Phil one day, and he said to me, "What are you doing now?" And I told him, and a week later he contacted me and said, "Listen, I've got this opportunity at Notto, and let's have a chat about it." Well, that was it. Yeah.
Wow, that there's so much to unpack there.
There's a lot there.
One,
Yeah.
yeah, one thing I'm curious about is you mentioned you got your passion for food at about 15 years old.
Yeah.
After reading the book White Heat, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you had this passion for food, but was there ever a consideration to maybe go to culinary school or anything like that? Or how did you end up in accounting? How did that work?
So that's a funny one, actually. Not culinary school, but I did want to be a chef. Absolutely. You know, I sort of got inspiration from all those great Michelin star chefs that were the self-taught, the likes of Raymond Blanc and the great Nico Ladenis. And I thought, fuck me, if they could do it, why can't I do it? So I literally became, I still am a geek. Literally, I was obsessed with my knife skills. I tried to buy all the equipment that I saw on cooking programs. I was like, okay, I need that pan, I need that spatula, and I would just absorb knowledge and recipes like osmosis. You know, all of a sudden it would just, the recipe would be in here. You know, I was talking to the exec chef Notto yesterday about a lemon tart, and I was just like, yeah, you know, 309 grams of caster sugar, 9 eggs, this, and he said, how are you remembering all this? So I did want to be a chef, and halfway through my university career, I wrote a letter to Raymond Blanc saying, listen, can I have the opportunity to spend a week in your kitchen? And that's what I did. I was 19, and I remember I got there and walked into the back door of the Malmar Kitchens, 2 Michelin star restaurant, and straight away I was put onto cold starters. I was like, what the fuck am I meant to do here? And I remember I was put on a section that was plating his classic dish of confit salmon. And there I was, a little shaky little thing, you know, trying to put these pieces of cauliflower on the plate. And that was a tough experience. That was my first exposure to life in a kitchen, in a Michelin star kitchen. It was just difficult, you know, big characters, very high standards. And I left there, whilst inspired, questioning, well, fuck me, is this for me? And then, you know, I suppose I tried to read as much information to support my conclusion that I had come to, that the kitchen wasn't for me. Because I convinced myself, you know, that it wasn't. Yeah, and in hindsight, I do think to myself, fuck me, if I became the chef, where would I be now, you know? So the biggest, you know, like I said, I've had the privilege of working with some fantastic chefs, but the one that I really take a huge amount of inspiration from is a chef called Thomas Keller, who is the only American chef to have 2-3 Michelin star restaurants, one in New York and one in Yountville, California, called the French Laundry. And he without question is one of the greatest chefs of his generation. But he tried and failed with a restaurant in his 30s in New York, and by his own admission, that was because he understood he can cook, but he couldn't run a dining room, and he couldn't run what he called a cash register, so the business side. And I thought, that's interesting. So that sort of said to me that you could be the most talented craftsman in the world, but if you can't make it work as a business, it's never going to work. And, you know, at university, I always enjoyed accountancy and numbers. Like I said, when I got into the real world, wasn't really, I didn't grasp it as quickly. You know, I'm not a naturally clever chap. I had to put a lot of effort in. But if you look at what, you know, the part of the business I run help to run at Notto now, it's very much numbers, 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 and I love it. So it's amazing how you evolve in your understanding as you get more experience.
Definitely. I'm glad I asked that question. So before we go down too many rabbit holes, what
Yeah.
is Notto and how did you guys start?
Okay, so Notto is a pasta bar, and we actually started as a delivery service in the height of COVID. And whilst that was good and we were incredibly happy with the quality of what we were doing, the concept evolved into a restaurant, which is, I suppose, where we naturally feel more comfortable. Um, and the whole brief is, Phil's whole philosophy about food, which is it's all about the delivery of pleasure. Food should have the capacity, and particularly pasta has the capacity to, when you take a mouthful, you just think, "Fuck me, that was delicious." And it's great to work with someone like Phil. 30 years as a Michelin star chef, amazing. Has worked for some amazing people, and really recognized in the profession as one of the top guys. And for him to apply his craft to something as humble and accessible as pasta, just means that we've raised the bar on what people in London should expect from a great bowl of pasta. And that's what we do. We're quality first. We look at the business after. And I think we just want to be the best pasta offering in London. And I think with the caliber of the team that we have, we absolutely can be that, because we're doing it the hard way, right? We've got a production kitchen. Everything is homemade. Everything you eat at Notto is homemade. The suppliers are the same suppliers that Phil has been working with for 30 years. So every concept of a dish, every cocktail, every glass of wine, we want to do it to the best, to the best possible standard. And that's basically it. It is very simply a pasta bar, but we want to make it the best pasta bar that Londoners have ever been to.
That makes sense. I mean, and that's a great goal to aspire to. But so I don't have much knowledge on what makes a good pasta bar, what differentiates these pasta bars. And so you've touched on a few things, but would you say those are the main components of what makes you guys a unique pasta restaurant compared to the others? Or are there other things that you guys do differently that separates you from the rest?
I think absolutely the quality and the standard of the food, without question. We change aspects of the menu every 3 weeks. The next menu change actually is a banging one. So that happens on the 4th of July, and it's just some of the dishes on there, marinated courgette salad with ricotta and a squid ink spaghetti with sardine, all these, and the black truffles are coming back on. So it's very exciting. We are constantly evolving. But I was always taught that great food is only one aspect. So if you see restaurants as a third, so 1/3 is absolutely the food. The second is service, and then the third is hospitality. So service is how you get from A to B, right? It's how you get that plate from the pass and you put it down in the correct way on a table, right? And we hold ourselves to high service standards. Okay, nowhere near the the bullshittery of Michelin star restaurants sometimes, with open body service and serving wine with one hand behind your back, or whatever floats your boat. But without question, a professional service. But we like to focus on hospitality. And hospitality is not exclusive to the restaurant profession. Any business, in my opinion, is in the hospitality game, because it's all about managing and building relationships. And we have an hour and a half to build a relationship with that table. And hospitality is all about understanding what that customer wants before they even want it. It is all about being yourself. In my opinion, it is not something that can be taught. We have the capacity as management to create an environment where the front of house staff and the chefs are comfortable to allow them to be themselves, because most people are naturally hospitable anyway. And it's all about how you make someone feel. It's that intangible thing. Our job is to make people feel better the moment they come through that door. You could come in and have a shit day, fucking someone gobbed on you in the tube and fucking it's raining outside or whatever it may be. Our job is to, make it better. And it's not hard. It's not difficult. It's as simple as a smile, all the way through to a deep conversation about, how the day was, or somewhere you've traveled to, or it all depends. Every customer is different, and you have to understand that those individual differences are so important. So it's up to us to adapt. That's why it's been great for my social skills, because I had none before I moved to London. And that's what it is. Hospitality in its simplest form is making people feel better about the world by the time they leave the restaurant. And that's what we try and do. That's the difference. That's what takes it from a good restaurant to a great one. And we aspire to be a great one.
And all those points you touched on just show how much more goes into running a restaurant and all the things you consider. I mean, everyone is familiar with going to a restaurant and sitting down and eating their food, but many don't appreciate how much attention to detail and what goes into simply just bringing that food to your table. I find it fascinating, and I don't know enough of these type of details and how much thought goes into it. And you're obviously very passionate about what you do, and it definitely seems like you're in the right industry for you. But from my understanding, the margins aren't amazing for running a restaurant, and so it's tough to make a killing and run a really successful restaurant. So were your parents supportive of you working in the industry after making the shift from accounting?
I think my mom was. She's always loved food. So she always knew I was a strong character, and I always wanted to sort of carve my own path. My dad's a very particular guy, and he wasn't, we don't particularly get on. We don't speak. And part of that is because, I carved my own path, and I had conviction in what I wanted to do. There was very little belief that, I could mold a career, in this industry. It is certainly coming from an Indian background that it's not seen as a reputable profession, which is a load of nonsense. I just think the answer to your question is no, but that never stopped me, because whilst confidence and confidence has been an issue in my life, it's not. Self-belief has not. And I've always thought to myself that no matter what happens, I'll always be okay. And that's what gave me the drive to just get my head down, work hard, and try and carve out a career in a profession that I feel really passionate about. Because that for me, that fulfillment in what you do on a day-to-day basis is really important. There is nothing worse than being in a job that you fundamentally hate, and you're doing it just to pay the bills. That for me doesn't really work. Has he changed his opinion now? Like I said, I don't really talk to him, but from my understanding, I think it's point proved from my part. But that's where, there's no belief. So what I'm delivering now are facts. So and the facts are that I've worked my ass off and continue to do so, and got some great mentors and people around me that are supportive. So I didn't necessarily need that family support, because I found it later on in life through a great host of mentors and
friends.
And I was always told, friends are the family that you choose, which is very, very true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is true. And that's such a great characteristic to have, that drive and self-belief. And many people struggle with that and maybe don't attain that sense of self-belief their whole lives. So what would you say, like, how did you get that self-belief? I assume the drive is from being passionate about what you do, but self-belief I see as something slightly different. Do you have any reasoning or understanding of why you have such a self-belief?
I think, just picking up on your point there, that drives come from passion. You have to understand, passion does this, right? Passion is not enough when you're in a restaurant, whether you're closing a restaurant at 2:00 in the morning and you're still there and you're tired and you've done 5 doubles, and what gets you through is a desire to do the job. That's where the drive comes from. It's a desire to do it properly. In terms of where does that self-belief come from, I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I think, I don't know. It's just something I've had since my teen years. It wasn't an easy upbringing. It was tough. My dad's a very hard man, and there were certain things that we were exposed to that just build that characteristic in me, I suppose. Knowing that, from the age of 14, 15, I was on my own. And I just realized that no one else is going to do it for you. You have to get off your own arse and do it for yourself. Because no one wakes up one day and say, I'm going to make fucking Byron Greeley successful. You have to have the conviction to say, what, this is what I'm doing, this is what I want to do, and I may have great days, I may have shit days, right? I may get things wrong. It may be 1 step forward, 5 back, but as long as your overall trajectory is like this through the mess, that's the most important thing. And I think, and I have the approach and attitude that, life should be hard. It should be difficult, because only when it's hard and only when it's difficult you find out a lot about yourself. And it should be messy, and it should be complicated, and nothing should be easily attainable. One thing my parents did give me is a work ethic. I've known since an early age that I can outwork people. And that again, that's no secret. That's not a golden goose. That's not rocket science. You just work harder. And that's what got me through my A levels, to university, and no doubt, the position I'm today. But I'm also very aware that there's so much more to come. There's so much more to do. So very rarely do I look back and think, oh yeah, I did that, or well, fuck me, yeah, that was a good achievement, wasn't it? No, it's literally, okay, what's next? Because there was a time where I was proving a point to prove people wrong, but now, without question, the 2 reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing and working as hard as I am and will continue to is there's nothing more fulfilling for me than being part of something that you can build, that we're building. And Notto is very much that. And that drives me every day. You know, I don't think I'm doing a good job. I don't think I'm doing a bad job. I just wake up every day and think, how do you make it better? But there is a part of me that wants to deliver for the people that have had the belief in me that I can do the job. And that, without question, is Phil and Julie. So then that's the reason why I do it. You know, my own self-fulfillment and building something for myself, but at the same time, wants to deliver for them. But like I said, years ago, it used to be prove people wrong, which is actually, that's a very short-term gain, and not a long-term thing. So yeah.
But useful in the moment.
Yeah, you fuck me. If you got a point to prove, use that to drive you. But understand that that's a finite thing, because when you do prove that point, trust me, you don't feel satisfied. You just think, oh, okay, now I need to understand the real reason why I'm doing it, because just to be able to say I proved you wrong, it's
isn't enough.
It's short term. Yeah.
You touched on so many different mental models that a lot of people sometimes never come to those type of conclusions their whole life. And fortunate for you, you came to those conclusions at such a young age. Having complete ownership over the trajectory of your life is such a valuable mindset to have, because a lot of people come up with excuses and blame external factors for what happens in their life. And so life sort of happens to them instead of them taking control of their life. And I'm quite amazed to hear that you came to this conclusion at such a young age, because it sets you on a trajectory for, I think, success, because you know that there's nothing else that is going to get you from A to B except yourself.
Yeah, I think
so.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, go for it.
I was just going to say, you know, it's all about accountability, and it's too easy to blame other people. And listen, I think we all go through that at one stage, and I think there are moments where we do that. But ultimately, you're responsible for yourself, and you know you've got to take responsibility, and you have to hold yourself accountable. And this is where friendships and deep relationships are really, really important, because if you've got the right people around you, right? And yeah, I haven't been on social media for 3 years because I think it's a load of bullshit. People genuinely believe that the 400 followers they have, or the 1,000 people on friends on Facebook, whatever the fuck it is, that's your friendship group. It's not. You know, I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant here, but I think as a society, we have stopped having the capacity and the capability to build meaningful relationships, because there's so many distractions and we don't have those skills anymore. You know, I can count on one hand my close set, and they know who they are, and without question, they have made me a better person, without question. Each one of them bring out a different side to my personality, but the one single trait that each one of them have that unifies them together is the fact that they are able to hold me accountable. When I get things wrong, when I get upset at work, when I fucked up, whatever it may be, and that's really, really important, because it keeps you grounded and it keeps you level-headed, knowing that whatever goes wrong is my responsibility. But you don't, and back in my early 20s, when I was an accountant, I would fuck up, you know, I'd take that home with me and like sit on it for a week, and it would absolutely destroy me, the fact that I've made a mistake. Now it's like, okay, my metric for measuring how bad the fuck up is anybody die? No. Well, if no one died, then you can fix it. And that is...
Yeah,
the most important. It's that mindset shift that I have to say has only happened to me in the last couple of years. That's the fuck up. Fine. But what are we going to do about it? And you can vent and bitch and go off on one in your friendship circle and say, you know what, that guy's a prick and, this happened and whatever. But ultimately, what matters is what you're going to do about it. And that's the most important thing.
100%. Definitely. And so, well, congratulations on no social media for 3 years. I'm sure it's doing wonders for your mental health. Yeah. So,
no, absolutely.
And you mentioned,
that was part of the reason. It was. I think you go on social media and you genuinely think that these people's lives are what you're seeing in a story, which is not. But for me, talking personally, it did make me think, okay, fuck me, I've just done a 16-hour shift and there's my mate partying. It's a bit of a downer. It is unhealthy.
Yeah, definitely. Comparing yourself to others constantly is not healthy at all.
Yeah.
But so you mentioned having a strong friendship group who's very supportive. And one thing that I wouldn't say I'm battling with, but it's something I think of quite regularly, is you have friends for different stages in your life.
Yeah.
And sometimes you outgrow friendships because they're not at the same stage in their life as you are. And have you grappled with that issue at all? And how have you handled it?
I think, I'm slightly different where, I'm not the guy that keeps in touch with mates from school, college, or uni. I was quite an introverted person. I didn't have, whilst I was popular, I didn't have friends, if that makes sense. Just because I was a shy, introverted guy with a lack of social skills. I think it's an interesting one. Without getting too philosophical, I do believe that everyone you meet is there for a reason. And okay, you outgrow people. For me, it's just a natural evolutionary thing. Any relationships that I've outgrown, you just naturally just drift. And you either accept it or you try and fight for it if you genuinely feel that it's worth it. In my case, it's often not. But listen, you are the sum of the 5 or 6 people that you spend most of your time. And that's what's important.
Definitely.
Everybody around is nice to have, and you're excited to see them and spend time with them. Absolutely. But ultimately, people just have to be comfortable with knowing that there are some people that are genuinely going to be there by the time you're 60, 70, 80 years old, and some people that you're not. It doesn't mean you dislike them as people. They don't coincide with who you are now as a person. But you have to be careful as well. That's like I said, it doesn't mean they're bad people. Often they're still good to have around because they provide. Okay, they're not fulfilling that function anymore, but they can fulfill another function. So it's up to you how much you value the relationship. Phil and Julian, for example, have known together for 30 years. And there's no secret. It's just one issue I did have, particularly with friendships, is overworking them, right? And when you overwork any form of relationship, when you're in each other's face too much, and you see each other too often, or you text each other every day, or whatever it may be, that there are signs that those things are being overworked. So naturally, all of a sudden, you'll think to yourself, "Fuck, I want a little bit of distance." And then you start thinking to yourself, "Oh, I'm outgrowing this person because, look at what this distance has given me. It's given me headspace." Well, in my case, there have been situations where you've overworked the relationship, so therefore you want distance on that basis rather than outgrowing them. So you have to be mindful of that as well. Like I said, if you can genuinely say to yourself that, I've got 5 or 6 people that are always there, right? They're the relationships you want to focus on and build. Did that answer your question?
Definitely.
I went around the house with it. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it did. And it's an interesting one, but it's also, friendship is like a two-way street.
Boom.
And so it has to be give and take, and friendships can fizzle out if you're the only one giving and giving and giving, and they're only taking. And that's also a sign that maybe that friendship shouldn't continue. And it's something I use as a kind of yardstick. I don't try to be too harsh on it, but if I'm always reaching out and I'm not getting much of a response back, then maybe it's a sign that we're not meant to be in each other's lives right now, and maybe we'll come back around at a later time. But it's, not to be too hard on yourself or too hard on the situation. It's just the way life works. So
Absolutely.
We've gone down a whole tangent, but I want to just go back to restaurants for a bit, and I want to ask you, what is the hardest part in your eyes about running a restaurant?
There's a whole host of things, every day's a challenge, because new things can new challenges crop up every day. I think the most consistent challenge is people, because it's a profession that attracts big personalities, and to navigate through that, being a big personality myself, it's difficult. It's difficult, and to keep a level of professionalism and harmony when you work 16, 18 hours a day together, that's tough. And it goes back to your point of or what we were just talking about, in terms of overworking relationships. So that's the biggest challenge, and that takes a level of awareness and self-awareness and maturity to manage in the correct way. Do I always get it right? Fuck no. Is there something that is constantly has to be worked on? Absolutely. Because get it right, then the restaurant will fly, because it means that everybody is doing the job that they're employed to do to the best of their ability. Because I'm privileged to work with a team at Notto, a senior team, that genuinely, restaurants are here, but it's also here. And you can teach a whole lot of things. You can't teach someone to care. And whilst we have our moments, as everyone does, you never lose sight of the fact that we're all there because we fucking care about what we do, and we want Notto to work, and it is working, and it's exciting, and that's it. But navigating through that is always difficult. But at the same time, if we all got on all the time, that'd be weird. It's actually healthy to have a level of tension and conflict. But there's a marked difference between all-out conflict and effective confrontation. And that's something that I'm sort of working through at the moment, because that's one...
Interesting.
That's one skill that I don't have.
That is interesting. So I've heard many horror stories within the restaurant business. So shit always seems to go wrong, particularly in restaurants. So do you have any examples of when this happened to you, or when you were around when stuff went wrong?
How long is this podcast? I could tell you horror stories all day. Listen, I think, I've only been on the restaurant floor for about 4.5, 5 years. I've sort of stepped away from the floor from Notto now, which is nice because I love it and it's great, and I love seeing our team do well, but it's not my thing anymore. But whilst on the floor, I think within those 4 or 5 years, I saw I saw a lot of things. Listen, I remember once we were doing a 7-course tasting menu, one Michelin restaurant I was working at, and towards the end, this customer had a tartare, and all of a sudden he just fainted off his chair, and I was like, "Fuck me, he's had a dodgy tartare." I've had a customer in a restaurant collapse on me with a suspected heart attack. I've had a lot. What I would say is, it's not about the shit that hits the fan. This is the wider point. It's not about the shit that hits the fan. It's how you respond to it. And there's a massive difference between reacting to something and responding to something. I'm a slight, if you have to ask the people I work with, but I'm a slight OCD character. And I like everything organized and straight to the point. So I have this thing where whatever we're organizing, whether it's mise en place, so preparation before service, or it could be the opening of a new restaurant, or it could be organizing an event, I would accept chaos on the night, because your job as a professional is to deal with the chaos on the night and respond to it. But I will not allow any form of chaos in the build-up. Any shit that hits the fan on the build-up, you deal with quickly. And that's the approach. So yes, shit goes wrong because human beings do rules that you can't control. But it's your job as a professional to just deal with it. And that's it. Just
That
deal
makes
with
sense.
it. Yeah. Don't get emotional. Don't get upset. Don't cry. Just deal with it.
Yeah, definitely. And so you were part of this Notto project, like you said, during COVID, before you opened the restaurant. What was it like being a part of that whole process?
In terms of opening the restaurant?
Yes, in terms of setting it all up and opening your first location.
Yeah, that was my first open. And the learning curve was this. Every single day was just an overload of information. But in those situations, you either sink or swim, and I think pressure is healthy, and certainly has the capacity to get the best out of me. I've always liked services, for example, where it's just on a knife edge. If one element goes wrong, then the whole service goes. And I like services like that. So I like to work like that as well. I have the attitude that no matter how organized I am, I always act like I'm in the shit, and I just need to get things done. But it's all about the team as well. It's very easy to say, oh yeah, I did this part, but it's a team. And with Phil and Judy and running it and leading it, that was the safety blanket, because like I said, it was my first opening, but there was a great amount of support around. Every day was challenging. Every day was a learning curve. You literally haggle and negotiate on every single item that you purchase, whether it's a fork, a knife, a spoon, all the way through to a coffee machine. So I really enjoyed that process. Dealing with contractors, I'm not, I don't do any form of DIY. So just learning. But I'll tell you what, I've never been afraid of asking questions. So I do this thing where, if I'm in a room full of people, doesn't matter who it is, accountants, contractors, electrician, doesn't matter what it is. If I fundamentally don't understand something, as simple as it may appear to be, I'll just put my hand up and say, I'm just going to be the idiot in the room for a minute. Can you just say that again? Or what does that mean? right? But I say just treat me like an idiot for a moment, because it breaks down the barrier, or it softens the blow of the question I'm going to ask. And some of those questions sometimes can be basic, but it's not a basic thing to me for me to understand. So I do that a lot. And I suppose the attitude I went in with is, I don't know it all, so let's not fucking pretend I know it all. And just ask basic questions, because it's all knowledge, it's all understanding. So don't be afraid to be the idiot in the room, because you're guaranteed the question you've asked, 3 or 4 people are thinking the same thing. They just didn't want to put their hands up. So yeah, and some people may laugh. Some people may laugh and think, oh, he's a fucking, he's a bit backward, isn't he? But don't care, because if I don't know, then I genuinely don't know. But you're guaranteed the next time it comes up in conversation, I'll know. And that's what it was.
That's such a valuable skill to have. A lot of people are, like you said, so afraid of asking questions. And then if more people in the room don't understand what's going on, then progress is going to be a lot slower, because everyone's just too nervous to speak up and ask a question. That's amazing.
I'm not an expert in building restaurants. I remember, someone was talking to me about an aircon system. So what the fuck are you on about, mate? That you take all that experience from asking those basic questions to understanding a little bit more. And that's the approach I have now. It's very much, like I said, I don't know the ins and outs, but I do my research and then I apply logic to it, and ask questions when I need to ask questions. As basic or as idiotic as they may seem, it's important for understanding.
Yeah. And Phil approached you and asked you to join him on this journey. What do you think gave him the confidence in you to join him?
Crikey. You have to ask him that one. We're interested to see what he says. Listen, it was a joint decision by him and Julian. Phil is someone, like I said, I worked with for nearly 3 years, and without question, one of the most important people in my career. And I hope he would say someone he can rely on to just get things done. And that part of my reputation is very important to me. I am someone that just likes to get things done.
That's a great reputation to have.
Absolutely, and that's why I'm determined to build. Because you can put excuses in the way and why you can't do something, and sometimes you just have to have the power and the conviction to say, okay, I'll do it. I'll get it done. You may, there have been times where I've disagreed, but ultimately they're running the business. It's my job to deliver what they want to deliver, along with the other senior members of the team. So you just got to get it done. You've just got to get it done. So that's what I hope Phil would say. Someone he could rely on, someone he could trust. That level of integrity is very, very important to me. Transparency. No matter what the fuck up is, I will always be honest about it and take accountability for it. I also like to think, Phil, you have to remember, he always sees the best in people. And last year I think it was last year or the year before, the Michelin guide, it's like the Bible in restaurants, issued Phil the first ever mentorship award, because they've recognized that he has trained so many great chefs and restaurateurs, and he is someone that sees the best in people. And trust me, there's a lot of things that I need to work on and hold me back, but I think Phil was able to balance that with the advantages of what my personality, character, and skill set can deliver. Julian as well, Jules is someone that I served as a customer at Ellison Street for years, and I tried to get a job with him once, and I think he could see I wasn't ready. And there was an aspect to my early career where I tried to rush it, and in rushing it, you fuck it up. And I think I hope he would say that, we've seen how Harvey has evolved and grown as a person. We feel like he was ready. Yeah, that's what I hope.
I'm sure he would. I mean, you're still around and delivering for him. So, yeah. And so you've labeled guys like Phil and Julian and Ken as mentors you've had throughout your career. How valuable is a mentor, and what advice would you give someone if they wanted to get one themselves?
Without question, mentors are the most important thing to have. For me, they fulfill more than just somebody that can advise you professionally. They can also guide you personally. And, I touched on before, I didn't come from a very supporting family, and got no mentorship in that way. So I suppose they do fulfill that role as well. But without question, these guys, again, hold you accountable. And you have to remember that all the shit that we're going through now as young professionals on this journey of building restaurants or building your career, they've experienced 10,000 times. So they know how to navigate what you're going through. And having someone on your side with that level of experience is so important. So important. And I think building those relationships is crucial to anyone's success. Because like I said earlier, you can't do it on your own. You can have the self-belief that you can do it, but because if you don't believe in yourself, no one else is going to fucking believe in you, right? And that's what a mentor does. They believe in you because they see something in you that you have, that you may not see in yourself, but they're able to sort of get out of you by asking the right questions and putting you in the right scenarios and situations. It's invaluable because, like I said, it goes back to accountability. And these guys have been through it. They are wise and informed and articulate and experienced. And that's why it's important.
I agree. And I don't want to dishearten people by suggesting that you need to have a mentor in person or even know your mentors. You can derive a lot of value from the resources that these people you look up to put out, and you could see them as a mentor and use their frame of thinking to help guide you in your life, but you don't necessarily have to speak to them, be there in person, because that could, I think, be used as an excuse for people and not getting started.
Absolutely. That's why podcasts are so important. I from my understanding, I think we both listen to other podcasts like Jay Shetty and Diary of a CEO, and there are certain episodes that will speak to us as individuals, different ones. Absolutely, you had heroes growing up, right? You had people that you admire and wants to be like and inspired you. They are as much mentors, even though you've never met them in your life, as anybody else. I've never met Marco Pierre White. I'll probably faint if I met Marco. Mentor, Nikola Dennis, Pierre Kaufman. You don't have to meet these guys. Absolutely, my first interest was business, and I remember I used to come up with concepts of having a distribution business to having a magazine, all these things. And that all came from watching Dragon's Den, right, as a 12, 13-year-old. And I was asked by one of my dad's mates once, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, I want to be sitting in that chair, because I saw them as mentors as well. You know, I thought, fucking hell, how cool. You sit in a chair, you do calculations, and then you invest in the business. That's fantastic. You know, you're building something.
Yeah.
So I'm with you on that. I don't think you don't physically need someone present with you to have mentors. You know, just read every book, listen to every podcast of who inspires you, and take the lessons and apply them. That's the most important part. Apply them. And we know, that's where people fall down. You could read as much as you fucking like, and you can have someone physically sitting there telling you, Harvey, you need to do this, this, and this. But if you don't apply it, and trust me, applying it is the hardest thing. It is physically demanding. It is mentally draining. It is one step forward. It's 5 back. You fall flat on your fucking face, and then you get back up. But you've got to apply it. Because if you don't apply it, you're wasting your time, and you're wasting the other person's time.
Definitely. And like some people refer to that as like mental masturbation. It's that going through the process of consuming all those podcasts, reading all those books, and you feel like you're being productive. Or even in the sense of starting a business, it's spending hours designing that logo or trying to think of the right name. And all of that stuff is not actually taking action, but it feels like you're making progress. And so it's almost a lie you're telling yourself just to feel like you're doing something. But it's the hard stuff that you're putting off is what you need to be doing.
Absolutely. And this is where that support system comes into play, because you need people around you that recognize that you're putting the hours in terms of knowledge. You are not putting the hours in terms of action. And you need those people to hold you accountable.
Definitely.
As painful as that conversation can be.
Yep. And are you happy with the person you are today?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah, quite a tough one.
That's a tough one. I'm happy with the capacity I have to balance different parts of my job and life. I think there's so much I have to work on that has really been exposed through pressures of opening and running restaurants. You know, I recently turned 30, and I said to Finn and Julian, I'm determined to make sure that all those things that held me back in my 20s don't hold me back in my 30s. And that's something that I'm very cognizant of and trying to work through. But, you know, the difficult thing, Byron, here is, you know, this is wiring that goes back 25, 30 years. It's not going to fucking take 25 or 30 days or 30 weeks to rewire it. It is constant self-awareness, effort, application. And that's draining.
It is.
And I think you'll always be happy with certain aspects of yourself, but it's healthier to focus on what's holding you back, because those aspects that you're happy with yourself, they're not part of your character, right? So they're naturally there. That's not to say you don't have to exercise them. Of course you do. But the real focus is sorting out what holds me back. So it's not really a yes or no answer. It is, am I fulfilled with what I'm doing right now? 100% yes. Without question. No matter how shit a day can be or great a day could be, absolutely 100% fulfilled. Because I'm under pressure. I've got a lot to do. I work with a great team, great directors, great mentors, great friendship groups. You know, the recipe's there. You know, if you want to do a cliche analogy, the recipe's there. But you've got to deliver. And like I said, the obsession for me right now is just building a reputation as someone that just fundamentally gets things done. And that's a constant.
That's great to hear. That you're fulfilled. And like you touched on, it's something that I'm also very conscious of is battling that social conditioning, those mental frameworks that are sort of ingrained in the way you do things, but they're the easy way, they're the thing you fall back on, and they're not conducive to growth. And it's just about being aware of them and trying to change those social conditioning. Well, now looking at them, probably you could label them as problems. But one of them for me was starting, like thinking of ideas, thinking it could possibly work, and then not taking action. And that's the reason why I started this podcast. It's finding ways to hold myself accountable so I can change that social conditioning to improve and grow as a person and not fall back and take the easy route. And
no, absolutely. I got
no, I was going to move on to the next question. If you have a response, go for it.
No, just with social condition. I think going back to what you just said of finding it difficult to start. Yeah, I came across this a couple of years ago, and it's been with me ever since. It's just no matter how it starts, just start. Because I was that person that would say, you know what, Monday I want to start doing this, and then Monday will come and fucking what do you think happens on a Monday? No matter what happens, just do it now. Starts now. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it goes wrong. Doesn't matter if you fuck up. It doesn't matter if you lose a bit of money. It doesn't matter whatever. As long as you've started, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, definitely. Because putting it off for long enough, it can tend to fizzle out, and you've persuaded yourself enough that it's not a good idea, and you never get around to doing it.
Absolutely.
And then it becomes that, what if, or it would have been great if I had done that, but it just doesn't seem like a possibility anymore and leads to regret.
Absolutely.
So what are you personally struggling with at the moment?
It's another good one. I suppose it comes back to the self-awareness. We went through a chat where, the most challenging thing about restaurants is people. And to navigate yourself through different characters and different personalities takes a level of self-awareness, and I don't always excel at that. I did a personality test recently where I score highly in conscientiousness, but also disagreeableness. And so that means there are certain times where things can be quite blunt. And that's what it is. It is a constant thing to work. And it's tough. It's tough. Like I said, it's 25, 30 years of wiring. So that, I wouldn't say I'm struggling with it. But I would say it's certainly a challenge. Struggles, absolutely. Depression, anxiety, been to therapy for it, complex PTSD I was diagnosed with, and all these things. And you do that to understand yourself, but more importantly, it's what you're going to do about it, and that's sort of the stage I'm at now. I wouldn't say I'm struggling mentally as much as I used to, but because my focus is what am I going to do about it, and if I am struggling, that friendship group comes into play. And I say to all of them as well, I don't care if it's 4:00 in the morning or 4:00 in the afternoon. If you need help, you need anything, you phone me. And it doesn't matter what I'm doing, I will literally stop what I'm doing and I will answer that phone. And those 5 people are the same. That's where your mentors come in as well. What I love about Phil and Jules especially, he will always make time. Always make time. And I just think to myself, if a man that busy with that many businesses and interests can make time, then I can make time. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a valuable lesson. It almost boils down to what we've been speaking about quite a lot, is just taking action. And speaking of taking action, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Crikey. So I'm in a job interview. It's that classic question, is it? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Listen, I used to think that far ahead, and it came back to bite me on the arse. I was that 21-year-old that said I wanted to be a Michelin star chef by the time I was 25, or own a restaurant by the time I was 25, or whatever it was. Does that mean you failed if you didn't get it by the time you're 25? No, of course not. So those kind of expectations, those kind of pressures are just unhealthy, and they're distractions. Notto has a certain plan that we've put together, and I think for me, as long as I continue to be fulfilled in what I do and nurture the right relationships, if I've still got those two things in 5 years' time, then I'll be a happy man. Because you know what? It's not about how much money you've got. It doesn't matter how much money you've got in your account, or the car you drive, or fucking how many holidays you go on, or whatever. Right? They're the tangible things that ultimately they're a function of and a byproduct of all the intangible things. That's
Definitely.
why my focus is always the intangibles. So if you are 5 years' time, fulfillment and nurturing the most important relationships.
That makes sense. And as I asked the question, I realized I wouldn't even be able to answer that question too.
What would
because
you say?
I'm
Just have interest.
I'm very similar. I'm very similar to you in the sense that 5 years' time is too far down the road to predict. It's
Absolutely.
There's so many. If you're doing so many different things and putting your energy in projects that you don't really know what will happen in 5 years, and it could lead to so many different other paths and tangents and people that you come across into your life. You have no idea how your life will unfold. But if you set slightly closer goals that you work towards in 3 months to maybe a year stint, and you focus on those, then the rest will unfold in a positive way, in my view. And so that I'm the same. What I'm focusing on at the moment is my new job. I'm doing the best I can in that, and going to see where it leads, but I can't predict what's going to happen in 5 years. This podcast and my newsletter, there's possibility of monetizing, and there's people that I'd love to speak to. But for the moment, I've got to focus on getting 20 episodes and maybe doing this for 1 year, just 52 episodes, see what happens from there. And people may reach out. This may come across other people's radars, and I meet people that I never even expected of meeting. So to put it down into a definitive 5 years, you never know.
Absolutely. But that's what's impressive. It's the fact that you're doing all this. It's the fact that you're doing all this that is impressive. Because you've got yourself out there. And that's an amazing thing.
Thank you. But it was part of taking action and just holding myself accountable. So one episode's going to come out every week without fail, and then it's see what happens. It's not really, I don't have high expectations. I'm not expecting millions of people to listen to it. I think those are unrealistic, and I'll probably just be disappointed. But the tangible things that I get from hosting this is to speak to people like you and have really interesting conversations, to learn different perspectives. And I'm growing as a person by simply having these conversations, and that's more than enough for me. So it's a win-win in my eyes, irrelevant of where it leads or what happens.
Yeah, for sure.
So my one last question about the restaurant business is, you kind of took the leap from your accounting job into the restaurant business. And I'm sure there's a lot of people, especially with some great shows on TV, that feel like they could be in the restaurant business, or it's something they're passionate about and want to give it a go. Is there any advice you would give someone, apart from just taking the leap, about how to get into the business or what steps they should take?
That's a tough one, because a very famous restaurateur here in London, a guy called Russell Norman, said this to me once. He said, Harvey, people genuinely believe that opening restaurants is like having their dining room with a tip. And it's not. It's really not. And I think, you know, it's tough, because you don't know whether something's for you until you try it. You have to be wired a certain way to be in this profession. You have to be slightly chaotic, slightly dysfunctional, and it's hard to articulate what people should feel or look for before they enter. If you genuinely feel it's right for you, then do it. Because trust me, you will learn very quickly whether this profession is for you or not. And if it is for you, then you often, that's it, that's your career. If it's not, then you leave very quickly. So, and it depends, if you, I would love for it to become more of a reputable profession. I still think it has the reputation of, unsociable hours, shit pay, and all these things, and it's not that. It can be that, absolutely right. It can be that with some operators, but with others, it's not. And it's. But what this profession does require is a personality trait that a certain generation does not have, which is patience. It takes patience, persistence, and practice to grow in this industry. You can't walk into a Michelin star kitchen and expect to be head chef. You can't walk into a restaurant and expect to be ops manager. And trust me, I've been there. I thought that's what it would be like. 21, 22 years old. Going back to Russell Norman, who I just spoke about, I wrote him a letter when I was 21, just graduated. I said, listen, I want to emulate what you achieved at Caprice Holdings. How do I do it? And he wrote me back. I've still got the letter to this day, a beautiful handwritten letter. And he said, the most important takeaway from that letter was, there is no shortcut. So if you want to do it properly, you have to invest the time, yourself, your emotions into this profession, because what comes out of it is as much fulfillment as you will get in any other profession when you reach the top. And I would love one day for this industry to have the equivalent of the Culinary Institute that is in America at the moment. That was built by some very famous chefs and restaurateurs. But that not only teaches you how to cook and run a dining room, it teaches you core fundamentals about business. So I'm sure over time this country will get to that. That's what I'm hopeful for as well. So I went off a bit of a tangent there.
Great advice.
Yeah.
No, that was great advice and makes perfect sense. You're not going to get there overnight. So my final question, as always, is the selfish question for me to just try and improve this podcast.
Yeah.
And so what advice would you give me on how I can improve hosting the show?
I think that's a tough one. I think you just got to keep doing it. You have the ambition of 52 of these. Make sure you do 52 of them. I think just by how you come across today, clearly you have the most important skill set that any host of a podcast needs to have, which is listening. And that's so you in my opinion, you have that fundamental. Just keep doing it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what if you get a shitty comment on wherever you post this on LinkedIn or whatever. Doesn't matter what other people say, because you're the one doing it. It's easy to write a comment, right? But get that person who wrote the comment to do their own podcast, then they'll see how hard it is. So I think it's a great thing you're doing, and I just think just keep going. That's it. Just keep going.
Thank you.
And then over time, you will evolve in your style. And I think your style will evolve as you get more accomplished people and people that have genuinely done something amazing. Your style will evolve. And the most impressive thing, Byron, is you've started. And fuck me, Jay Shetty, Stephen Bartlett, all these other people, Joe Rogan, they all had to start somewhere. But now you're part of that because they did start. Doesn't matter what, regardless of what other people said to them. And I also think that diversifying your range of participants is really important, to keep it fresh and interesting and what have you. So I know your thing is tech and everything like that, but it's nice to have people from different industries, and so just to keep it more applicable to a wider audience is the observation I would make with that. Apart from that, it's I think it's an amazing thing you do.
Thank you. That's great advice, and something I am noticing, putting in the reps. I've recorded about 9 or 10 episodes now, and I'm already noticing the changes. It's quite a quick feedback loop because I watch the recording over while I edit the video, and so I'm learning about the mistakes I'm making and trying to make those changes in the very next episode. So I'm enjoying the process, and like I said, very fast feedback loop.
Have you seen your interview style evolve over the 9 podcasts that you've recorded?
Yes, I've noticed myself become a bit more relaxed,
Nice.
particularly with sticking with the questions, because it's, I have like I sent you the questions, and there's a bit of a structured process in terms of these are sort of the beats that we're going to hit. And when I started, I think it was because of nerves, possibly. I stuck to that structure more rigidly. And now I'm finding myself, like I told you before we started recording, taking notes mid-conversation so I can refer back to particular points and go down different paths that I may not have had on my sheet beforehand. Sure. So, and it is a skill also listening to what you're saying and looking at the questions and seeing whether I need to ask that question because those points may have been raised or addressed in a previous answer. And so it's a balance of making sure I cover everything I want to, but coming across naturally and touching on points that are actually interesting conversational points that I may not have thought of. And I'm definitely not amazing at it yet, but I've noticed improvements already compared to when I recorded my first episode. So it's really enjoyable just learning about the different ways of doing things and seeing what works for me and how it can improve. So I'm loving it.
Good for you.
Thank you. So thanks for chatting with me today, Harvey. I genuinely really enjoyed our conversation. I thought it was wide ranging and we explored some really interesting topics. It was great learning about Notto and the struggles of the restaurant business, and I'll definitely be visiting again soon. So if people want to learn more about you and Notto or simply get in touch, how can they do so?
Yeah. Well, with Notto, just the website, book a table. Like I said, the menu change is happening on the 4th of July, and it's probably the best menu we've ever done. So that'll create a new standard for us. I think, in the heart of Piccadilly. So come and see us, because it is a great restaurant. It is lots to do and lots to work on, but fundamentally, the whole team, from the exec chef to the GM, all the way down to the kitchen porters, are doing an amazing job. And finally, building a team that is absolutely solid and a pleasure to work with. So yeah. But thank you for your time. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
I've really enjoyed it, and must
Good,
say
as have I.
it again. Notto is an amazing restaurant, and I've really enjoyed my time there. So I'd definitely be back.
Good.
Thanks again, Harvi, and speak soon, and see you soon. Cheers. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. Harvi shared so many great stories and interesting perspectives. But one thing that really stood out is you have to be really hungry and want to work in this industry. It can chew you up and spit you out. See you next week.